1 week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes, we are coming live. Well, not live, actually. We're recording earlier for the Industry Experts podcast. We're coming from San Diego, California. As you can see, my beautiful hotel room behind you. There might be even a pillow back there. Look at that. I am on the road, but I brought my equipment with me. So we are going to continue bringing you the best that we can. Without further ado, I'll bring him in right away. You know him. You've seen him around. You know my good buddy. We talk all the time. Mr. Tod Burros is going to be joining me today. We are going to talk NFL schedule release. We are going to talk the importance of Week 16, Week 17, the theoretics behind that, the actual mathematics behind that. And he's going to bring some new stuff, some proprietary material that he just developed for this season, Todd's confidence rating. So without further ado, Mr. Tod Burros, how are we today, man?
I'm good. As always, I love talking to my good buddy, Mark Garcia, and we can hit the highs and the lows.
Ah, yes, dude. Starting it off right. Let's go. I forgot to mention, follow Todd on Twitter at bestballnfl. You can see it on the screen, and follow his work that he is providing for Sharp Football Analysis as well. Head on over there and check that out. So, Todd, tell me a little bit about this confidence ratings that you developed this season.
So I'm doing my own Run to Daylight podcast again.
Okay.
Sharp didn't want to do a whole best ball thing again. And honestly, I'm sure you're finding out once you put out all this great information and have all these great guests one year, it's a lot of energy and time to kind of make it all fresh for a second year. Not that it's bad to repeat things, but so I'm happy to do my own thing and still work with Sharp. So they came to me and said, look, we would like you to do best ball rankings for our draft offerings. And I said, well, I really don't like rankings because they don't have any texture. And
Yes.
best ball, as you know, is all about texture, right? So they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've been tinkering around with this idea, and we came up with the name confidence ranking. So basically, there's 5 different categories. There's a guy you're targeting, and targets are guys you can draft at least one tier ahead of where they're going, maybe more. Typically, you don't want to draft them more than one tier ahead because you don't have to, right? But, like in a situation, if I have a target in the 13th round and I'm in the 11th round and there's really no one else I like and he would complete a stack, maybe I would jump 2 tiers. The next category is value. And a value is a guy that I'm prioritizing within a tier. So typically, if there's only one guy that is a value within a tier and I don't have any positional or stacking needs, I'm going to take that value. So it kind of gives you an idea of when to take people. And then neutral is the middle category. About 50 to 60% of players are neutral. What does neutral mean? Neutral means that, and I didn't explain this well, but we put up Underdog's current ADP, and then I rank each player by these rankings. So a neutral guy means that he's perfectly fine to draft or not draft at ADP. Caution is very similar to value. It's a guy that I'm not really taking at ADP unless he falls a tier or I can get him in a stack or a correlation that adds value to put him back into the neutral category. And the last category is avoid. Avoid are guys that I'm at least 1, maybe 2 tiers. I think that, and there's not a lot, it's like certain decks of cards you don't get a lot. You don't get a lot of targets. You don't get a lot of avoids. You get a good amount of cautions and values, but most people are neutral. So it's a long way of saying it gives you the confidence in how to build your best ball teams where regular and traditional rankings really don't help you to draft.
I love that. I love that you brought up the fact that rankings are not necessarily good. I don't want to say not good to use, but the fact that people are so tied to rankings, and we provide rankings. Like my rankings are up on 1 week season for best ball. For Underdog, you have Mike's who does rankings for drafters and DraftKings, but it does not guide a draft. It is there as a tool to utilize to have that confidence in players.
It
like
can actually do more harm than good.
100%.
Because someone could draft based on the rankings without any context of all the other things that you and I teach people to do when they best ball draft. And
Yeah,
it could actually be a negative.
I love that. And I think it comes from a misunderstanding of what rankings are. Rankings are built on season-long median projections. So it is the 50% outcome for a player, and then you rank them, list them down the line. If the problem with doing that is, one, we're not playing a season-long game. Like best ball is a weekly game. And two, we're not looking for median projection. So it's inherently, I think, a messed up process that people just get comfortable with is looking at rankings and drafting off of rankings, and everyone's ranking this, ranking that. So I love the way that you phrase that, in that it's not like it can do more harm than good. You see the rankings up here from these are the baseline rankings of based on ADP over at Underdog. Do you have? I'll ask the question: is everybody in this first 2 rounds a median player, or like what did you call it? Just a middle?
A neutral.
Neutral. Is everybody a neutral? Do you have any fades?
Not everyone. Let me get to it.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let me get to it because, but you hit on a good point that so I've got the first 8 guys as neutral, and this. Okay. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. Hold on, let me get the updated one. So I've got the first 9 guys as neutral, although you could argue Bijan as a value.
Okay.
I've got Puka Nacua as a caution, and then neutral down to Jonathan Taylor, who I have as a value. I've got Drake London as a caution, neutral on Ayuk and Olaf, value on Devontae Adams, and then neutral through the end of the second round. So, to your point, there is a lot more rankings as you go along. And you'll notice there's no targets and there's no avoids in the first 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want to build up huge ownership on anyone. Guys who are in the first and second round typically are there for a reason. And I've learned that I want somewhere between 5 and 15% on everyone in the first 2 rounds. And I want to mix it up so I have different builds.
Okay. Tell me maybe some of your targets and some of your complete avoids as you scroll down here.
All right. Give me 1 sec. All right. So my first, pre-best ball, we knew less, so there was more targets. But right now, my first target is Kyler Murray. All the way down at pick 79. I feel that Kyler, now that Marvin Harrison is in tow, Trey Baker, McBride is in tow, his ability to run full year, I think he's a very, very good value. Other targets include, I'm sorry, I'm looking at last episode. Yeah, so Kyler is a target. The next target is Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
Then I've got Dontavian Wicks, Jawan Johnson, Javon Baker, and Greg Dulcich. That's it. Those are the only guys that I'm willing to push up at ADP. There was definitely closer to 10 pre-draft. As far as avoids go, I've got Romeo Dubs. Oh, let me go all the way. Yeah, Romeo Dubs is my first avoid.
I like that.
I've got Keaton Mitchell is an avoid. Alexander Madison is an avoid. Braylon Allen is an avoid. A.J. Dillon is an avoid. So not many avoids. Plenty of cautions.
Yeah.
And again, I want to see how things shake out. I leaned this last update into being less likely to go to extremes because we're still processing so much post draft and schedule release. But in general, there shouldn't be a ton of them because ADP is pretty efficient.
Yeah, I concur on that 100%. And it's interesting for the best ball plus people in the room who listened to my session yesterday. I expressed some fairly significant caution on the Arizona Cardinals, primarily Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison. And the reason for that is the dynamics of their team. I mean, we have a defensive-minded head coach. We have a team that has proven to want to run the football in the red zone. We have a team coming off of scoring 19.4 points per game last season. So it's actually, to me, and in that vein of like this discussion on weekly range of outcomes that we were talking about, to me, Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. had lagging weekly range of outcomes compared to the guys that they were drafted around. And a lot of that for me came from the quarterback, from Kyler and going reverse engineering that whole equation, because when we look at quarterback scoring and what is required for an elite ceiling type week, it's touchdowns. It's like touchdowns. So I doubted Kyler's like ability to hang a 304 type game. Now that's very interesting that you
Can
bring
I jump
up.
in?
Yes, please. I will love this discussion.
So
looking forward to it.
Kyler last year came off of we can't go off of the Cliff Kingsbury offense, but I don't know that we could go off of last year where he came back, toward the end of the season and wasn't running as much as he could. You also add a Marvin Harrison, and that can change. So one of the biggest things I think people miss about running quarterbacks is people think that running quarterbacks don't have a floor when the truth is they don't necessarily have a ceiling, right? So I'm going to go by FFPC numbers.
Okay.
Week 9, Kyler scored 21 points, then 25, 23, 13, 17, 23, 26, and 20. So that shows a tremendous floor and an okay ceiling, right? You really want a couple 30-point weeks in there. I really feel like adding Marvin Harrison Jr., who should be very good in the red zone, I really feel gives them that extra ability. I think it's a fair point that you make, but if I might be so bold as to say it was a short sample size, and I think a guy like Kyler can run in 2 touchdowns any week, and if just we know that touchdowns are the least sticky part of fantasy football, pretty much, right? I mean, there's some guys who get them more than others, but to say that the running back's going to get them all. I remember a couple years ago, Aaron Rodgers threw like 1 million touchdown passes near the 2-yard line, and then the next year they ran the ball. Same coaching staff, same players, and they just chose to go in a different direction. So I would say that I think that Kyler does have the touchdown equity more than what you're saying. And I think that he was like the 5th quarterback the 2 previous years, and he's being drafted as the 9th, 10th quarterback. So that's why he's a target for me. I feel like the floor is there, and I think with Marvin Harrison locked in, and who else did they bring in at wide? They've got
Zay
George.
Jones. Yeah, Zay
they
Jones.
just brought in Zay Jones too. And I think Benson makes the offense better too, along with Connor. So, and I believe they also. Let's look at their draft. I think they either brought in free agency. Of course, it doesn't want to just give it to me real easy. Hold on.
That's all right. They took Darius Robinson, then edge at 27, so their second first round pick. They took cornerback Max Melton at pick 43. Trey Benson was their round 3, as we know. A guard, Isaiah Adams, out of Illinois for another third rounder. Their third rounder, they took tight end Tip Riemann. Cornerback Elijah Jones in the third. They had 4 thirds, dude. That's insane. Safety edge, offensive line.
All right. I thought they had signed one good offensive lineman. But I don't know Evan Brown or Tristan Colon. Those are guys that they signed.
Yeah.
I thought there was one big name guy that they got.
Oh, it was Jonah Williams. Jonah Williams from Cincinnati.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a chance of an improved OL as well. I'm okay. I think you raised a fair point, though. But
I dig that. No, that's what stood out to me when you were going through those, because it was like literally I was talking about that on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So I recorded those. Like those are the last 2 sessions we talked about. Viewing
JM
players
used to always talk about when he was digging into best ball with me back in the day. It's about picking. It's not. It's like I'm hard. I've got cautions on every Houston Texan wide receiver and the quarterback. Right, they were the hot team last year. They're ADPs. They're hard to stack together. He's not a running quarterback. Love the players, just don't like the ADPs. The goal is to find that team that has the ability to take the step to the next level. And I think that the Cardinals are one of those teams, right? That they now have, they did, you said, what did you say? 19 points a game.
Yeah.
And where was that in the leagues? Like middle of the pack?
Bottom 10.
Okay. But you add a guy like Marvin Harrison, and you also got to figure that they didn't use Trey McBride the first half of the year in the role that he's going to have. Yeah. I think there's significant upside.
Do you have any other teams that you've identified as potential to take that next step this season?
Let me look. So
I'm very vocal about my top one.
Obviously Atlanta.
Okay.
I am really, really high on the Falcons. Not only adding Kirk Cousins, but getting rid of Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
Right. And they've got a very friendly schedule overall, from what I've seen. Let's see. And again, this is based on, like if you consider ADP, like I'll say the Broncos, right? I think that I really like Troy Franklin.
Okay.
I think Cortland Sutton is going too cheap, a JM favorite from back in the day.
Yeah.
You've got Javonte Williams, and now you've got Bo Nix. Well, the thought is that they reached for him, right? Well, what if he's not bad? I mean, Russ wasn't that great. I'm not saying that they're going to be a team that we're drafting like the Texans next year, but I think both. The other one is I've never been a Deontay Johnson drafter, but we saw how Bryce Young just peppered Adam Thielen. He peppered his best guy. Well, and the only guy who could get open. Well, the one thing we know about Deontay Johnson is he's always open. So I've been 5% or less on Deontay Johnson each of the last few years, especially in half PPR, where, getting, 7 catches for 58 yards and the occasional touchdown doesn't move the needle at his ADP. I think Deontay Johnson and Bryce Young are another interesting late stack that you can pick up pretty much anytime.
Okay, I'll buy that. My offense that I think is being extremely slept on so far this year is the Tennessee Titans. How does that make you feel? How does that make you react?
Well, what do people always overlook? You think that people bake in coaching changes, but they don't always do it enough.
Mm-hmm.
What do we talk about? Biases, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I was going through the week 17 schedule, week 16 and 17 schedule, I saw Tennessee has Indianapolis and Jacksonville, but I was looking at it as Jacksonville has Tennessee. And even though I know it, my first my thinking is still Mike Vrabel is the coach, and they're not going to be an explosive offense when the GM has come in and invested in weapons. So Tajay Spears, I love Tajay Spears. His ADP fell too much on the Tony Pollard signing. He was a target last time, and I moved him down to from target to value. And this is something I wrote about in my article that'll come out on Friday, and that article is free, is that
I've
downgraded a lot of the running backs from target to value because there are so many running back values that it lowers, your need to target any individual running back. But I even like Pollard and Spears together at their ADP because I think you'll get a usable week out of one of them almost every week. And if one of them gets hurt, the other guy could give you third round value. So that's a long way of saying you've got Hopkins. Who was the other big receiver they had?
Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley.
Tyler
and Will
Boyd.
Levis can hurl it. I haven't drafted much of the receivers yet, other than Hopkins. I draft a decent amount, but I've been coming around. So long way around of saying it's not shocking to me that you're on them, and I would give that call a value.
Nice. I dig it, man. Yeah, bringing in Brian Callahan, bringing in Nick Holtz, those two, they played high school football together. It's kind of weird. Brian Callahan was the quarterback. Brian Callahan, the new head coach of the Titans, and his offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, they played high school football together. Callahan was a quarterback and Holtz was his wide receiver, and now they're coaching together. It's kind of interesting. But the fact that they're both offensive minded, the fact that Brian Callahan, by extension, under Zach Taylor, comes under the Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, new age look offense. They're doing those unique things. We see they are serious about developing Will Levis. I mean, he's got a rocket of an arm. He led the league in average intended air yards per pass attempt last season. They bring in Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. They bring in Tony Pollard. They draft their left tackle that they need to protect him. So this is an organization that by their actions has kind of showed me that they're buying in. They're building around Will Levis. Yeah, and they're going for it.
Rand Carthon is not showing signs of somebody who's trying to rebuild over the long term.
Yep.
This is a team that was a playoff team every year but last year. And I don't think they view themselves as some kind of rebuilding team. And I'm on board.
I dig it, man. So we're already at 24 minutes, and that was awesome. Thank you for bringing up your confidence rankings and walking us through that. That was great.
Absolutely.
Again, are those are found over at Sharp, dude?
Yep. Yeah. Every week, every 2 weeks, I update. As we get closer to the season, it'll be weekly. I write a free article that highlights some of the big trends and some of the big players. Some weeks it'll just be a couple guys in each category and why. This last week's was more about the change in the running back, how I view running back position. But the actual rankings are part of the draft package.
That's awesome, man. So head on over to Sharp Football Analysis, check out Todd's confidence rankings, and that's going to lead us right into talking about this playoff.
Oh, by the
schedule.
way, I
Yeah.
only have an agreement with them for underdog. So if there's a site out there that wants my rankings for FFPC and DraftKings, I am certainly open to that.
I love that, man. Zero shame. Get that out there. Somebody get on the books with Todd to get those rankings. Leading us right into the schedule. We are over the next 3 weeks. That is all you're going to hear people talking about. We've already got the heat maps. We've already got the cheat sheets. All that stuff is out. My favorite thing to use to memorize this, because we are going to need to memorize these because it is very important. We've talked a lot about why that is, but we'll reiterate here in a minute. But I don't want to see the dome games. I don't want to see the people talking about weather. I don't want to see if it's going to be outside in Chicago or Buffalo. I want the damn matchups, and I want to get rid of all that other stuff. Are you the same? Are you worrying about dome games and weather?
I'm going to take it right back to my confidence rankings.
Okay.
Right? There's 5 rankings for a reason. I wouldn't say that dome game is a neutral, but I wouldn't say it's a big value either. Right?
Okay.
To me, it's more of a tiebreaker. Right? So if I'm on the clock and I'm really struggling between 2 guys and they're both correlated week 16 or week 17, and one of them is going to be in a dome and one of them isn't, yeah, maybe I will take the one in the dome. So as often in life, people want things to be black and white when there's shades of gray. To me, those things are nice to haves, not need to haves.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, there are certain people on Twitter who try and get an audience by overemphasizing smaller things that only matter a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the one that I found. So we'll shout them out here. This is Splash Plays that they put together. And I wasn't going to go do this for subs because everybody else is doing this. But for those listening, this is the one that I found that kind of fit what's important to me. And
I like this one because it took week 15 out. Can you send this one to me?
Yes, I will. I will when we get off. Yeah, that is. So let's talk about what's important. And again, listeners have heard me continue to talk about this. The contest rules tell us what is important. They tell us via the payout sheet. They tell us via the advancement rates. And that all goes into this magic, all-encompassing idea of what we're doing here as far as our money goes in expected value. Expected value is what is important in a contest because that's what affects our bottom line playing these games. The single highest contributor to expected value in playoff style contests, which are on DraftKings, on Underdog, on FFPC, is week 17. But the second highest contributor to expected value in those contests is advancement rate. So those are the two bottom pillars in our hierarchy, our decision-making process, because they're the greatest contributors to EV. That said, right behind advancement rate, and it's very, very close, is week 16, because we have to get a team to week 17 to be worrying about optimizing for said week 17. So yeah, I agree. The last thing on the hierarchy of expected value is week 15. It's lower than week 17, then week 16, then advancement rate. So naturally or theoretically, are we ever thinking about that? Well, yes, because it is a contributor to the expected value equation, but it's so low down on the hierarchy, and we have sometimes
especially if you're doing a live draft.
Yeah, we have only 30 seconds
like if you
to
do
make these decisions.
Draft, I mean, but when I'm doing a live draft on Underdog, I'm not going to look at week 15. It'll pop up if you use the spike week overlay, but if you put too much in your mind, you can miss what's most important.
Yes.
And I really, I've gotten in a lot of heat over the years with some of the big name guys on the internet because I felt that just like daily fantasy. What ruined daily fantasy? It was that only 5 to 10% of people were profitable every year. That model is great for growth when people think they're going to win the big prize, but then when they lose money 3 or 4 years in a row, they're done, and then the prize pools drop. I was getting a lot of heat because I kept saying underdogs should flatten the payouts, right? So, and people would say to me, well, no glory, no risk it, no biscuit. And that's all the kind of platitudes people say when they don't think they're going to lose money, right? Once you've lost money 4 years in a row, maybe, like one of the big guys, he backed off it. So to me now, it kind of is. See, to me, in the past, playing on a site like FFPC, where my EV was so much better, so my chance of breaking even was so much better. If I got a 30% advance rate and I had a good week 15, I wasn't going to lose money on the FFPC. One year, I had a 30% advance rate on underdog. I doubled my expected advance rate in week 15. All my teams in week 16 got wiped out, and I lost 1/3 of the money that I entered. So think about that. I doubled, I almost doubled my advance rate. I doubled my week 15 advance rate, and I still lost 33% of my money.
Yeah.
So to me, I played underdog, but it was less, right? Well, now, where if you max out a tournament, if you get one team to week 17, you at the minimum break even, and which means you're going to be profitable because you're going to advance more than that one team. Well, now how you play can be like salt and pepper, right? You might like a lot of salt and pepper on food. I might like a little. There's no one way that's right or smart. But I think, that now it is and I don't know that I'm making the point as succinctly as I want, but I am so much more excited to play underdog this year because of that fact. And it makes week 6, so here's what I want to say. In the past, it made way more sense to just focus mainly on week 17, because it was about not only getting to week 17, but getting to the top. Well, now, because there's so much value in just getting to week 16, I think it's salt and pepper about how much you want to mix in your week 16. If someone wants to still go for it week 17, I don't think that's dumb anymore. But I think if you really focus on your correlations, almost even between week 16 and 17, I think that's also viable.
Yeah, and people will naturally be like, oh, the first prize went down from 3 milli to 1.5 milli. First of all, 1.5 milli is life-changing money for a lot of people. A lot of people playing these
for every single one of us playing.
Right? Yes.
Every single one of us. There's also now 20, I think, $100,000 prizes. And for a lot of people, $100,000 is life-changing money. It takes so much of the stress of your life away. If you're a guy making 70 grand a year and you're paying bills and you win 100, that's pretty life-changing.
Yeah. The second thing that is probably going to go overlooked is, even with the first prize getting cut in half, the expected value of reaching a team to the finals went up by 27% compared to last year. So they did a great job with the structure this year. I will argue that till my deathbed.
Going from a 1 of 18 in week 16 to 1 of 13 is probably a huge part of that 27%.
Yeah, an expected the value of getting a team to the finals last year in BBM 4 was about 14.5 grand. The expected value of getting a team to the finals in BBM 5 this year is about 18.5 grand. So it went up with the first prize coming down. That tells me that they did a very good job at allocating money. smartly to make it so like making it to the finals is still not like this boomer, but I mean, it is like we're still playing for first, right? Like, let's not get that twisted. But now you have a better shot of making a profitable year, which is going to affect their ecosystem, we'll say, of people being able to retain money to retain people on their site. So it was a good thing for them. It was a good thing for players. I loved it.
So do you want to hear my biggest takeaway about the schedule for Underdog?
Yeah.
All right. And it's looking to build teams that have correlations in week 16 and week 17, right?
Okay.
So to me, when you look at, let's start with the most obvious best schedule is the San Francisco 49ers.
Yes,
Going
sir.
Going to Miami, another high scoring team for week 16. And the fact that Miami's at home makes it much more likely that it's going to shoot out, if last year is a indicator. And then Detroit in week 17. Mm-hmm. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to want one or two 49ers with one each of Miami and Detroit as best I can. So, one of my big theories of this year, and there's a couple ways that I've decided how to do it, but you want to have the guy who gets you to week 16 bring along someone from his team or from a correlation that isn't going to normally be there. So what's a perfect example? I did a draft today, my first live draft. I got the one, so I took Christian McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
I then took George Kittle. I didn't spend on Ayuk or Debo. I waited because I didn't. So, and then I got Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
So what could happen? If week 16, Christian McCaffrey puts up one of his patented 40-point weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are going to, out of 500 teams, there might be 200 to 250 of those teams might have Christian McCaffrey. But only a small amount of those teams will also have Brock Purdy and George Kittle.
Mm-hmm.
If Christian McCaffrey gives you 18 points in week 17, but George Kittle gives one of his 40-point weeks and brings Brock Purdy with him, you have gotten to week 16 while it's kind of one of Zandemir's old things. Because people don't like stacking the running back with their stack, because it is negative EV, but it's negative EV within 1 week. But the advantage you gain by having uniqueness in that following week, same thing. If you have Kittle and Purdy and they go crazy in week 16, you might only have, 5% of Christian McCaffrey in week 17. If he has only like a 12-point week, there'll be a ton of Christian McCaffrey teams eliminated. So that's one way. And I think there's a couple other ways where you can, whoever gets you to bring week 16, you want them to bring along a lower owned stud who can do it for you in week 17 while being low owned.
Let's talk about that real quick. I love that you brought that up. And this is something that we've talked about in the past. I would argue that the quarterback, running back, pass catcher stack is not minus EV. I would argue that its hit rate is much lower, but you have to also consider the other piece of that equation in the field's utilization rate. Because if it's hitting higher than the field is utilizing it, that's actually plus EV. 2 years ago, I did a study on the Millie Maker winners and the optimal roster for a 2-year sample. This was 2021 and 2022 seasons. And I found, because when we're talking about building a roster for best ball, in the money rounds, week 15, 16, and 17, it isn't effectively a 1-week contest. So it helps to look at some trends from DFS, I think, and port
Agree
those in.
100%.
And I found in that 2-year study that the optimal roster on a given week over that 2-year sample, so that was 34 weeks, a quarterback, running back, pass catcher stack found the optimal roster at a 22.1% rate. I would argue that the field is nowhere near that in utilization, particularly in best ball.
I think you're hitting on a good thing. I was more talking to how people view it versus how owned it will be, and it's even better that it's not actually. Now I'm not against doing it with a non-pass catching back if it's going to give, but again, let's take it to a team that you like. What if you took Tajay Spears, Will Levis, and DeAndre Hopkins?
Yes,
right.
I have been.
And Tajay Spears goes nuts in week 16. There are going to be almost no DeAndre Hopkins, Will Levis teams with Tajay Spears the next week. So the further you get down in the draft, the less I think you need someone who's going to pop as a pass catcher, if long as they can pop as, in general.
And I think, and this is theory, it's unproven, but I think the most profitable way to build a quarterback, running back, pass catcher correlation on a best ball roster is to use the quote unquote per depth chart backup running back. That sends the amount of the field that is going to have that into like the minutia. There's not a ton of people that are going to be doing that.
I have this year, another one of my things that I'm doing a little bit different this year is trying to take who is drafted near someone in the first round. So let's say I get CeeDee Lamb in the first round. Who goes right next to him? Two guys.
Tyreek
and McCaffrey. So I am going to be way more interested in Elijah Mitchell, which is what you're alluding to. But I'm also going to be way more interested in Jalen Waddle. Because if Tyreek fails, a lot of times it's going to be because Waddle, he got hurt, and Waddle is now going. So now what you've done is you've given yourself the shot to have the best 3 players in the league, and to have these advanced, because I've learned from my studying of advance rates that when there's an injury near where your first or second round player was drafted, the advance rates get supercharged because all those teams right near you have failure.
So last year we're talking like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, guys around those.
Well, last year, let me look at last year's ADP real quick.
While you're doing that, let's just hammer down what you just did. What you just did was describe leverage.
Correct.
That is leverage. That is not, hey, this guy's going to be high owned. I'll just grab this guy and now I'm leveraged. What you described, good. What I just did, not good. I'm going to go into more depth into that this coming week for the OWS Plus, or for the 1 week season Best Ball Plus subscribers. But you just hit the nail on the head describing leverage, and that was gold.
Yeah, so perfect example. Justin Jefferson went 1-1 last year. Josh Jacobs and Calvin Ridley were right around the corner, right? At the 2-turn on the FFPC. Well, Christian McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill went 2 and 3, and they both went off. So you didn't really see the supercharge effect, right? But if Tyreek had also, and you still saw Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek have huge advance rates because Jefferson got hurt and Jamar Chase got hurt, right? And Travis Kelce did under, and Diggs and Eckler. So it supercharged both Tyreek and McCaffrey. And the leverage is if you also had Addison instead
Addison.
of Jay,
Hawkinson until he got hurt.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's how you you could end up with some, if you got lucky and you had 15% CMC. I mean, CeeDee Lamb this year, and Tyreek and CMC both got hurt, and you had Elijah Mitchell on a good bit of those teams, and you had Waddle on a good bit of those teams, you would have sick advance rates.
Yeah. Or even like Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or George Kittle. It doesn't necessarily have to be the direct backup of the guy that got hurt, because that's going to influence.
That was the point about Waddle.
Yep. 100%. I love that.
Well, it's what we always talked about on OWS DFS. This is where DFS does apply. It's who is going, if I'm right, who is going to benefit, right? And if I'm right on CeeDee Lamb, I want to add to that value by drafting the backups of the guys close.
I love it, dude. That is pure magic. Another team that kind of surprised me with this week 16, week 17 layout is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Getting that grunge match, that divisional matchup against Baltimore, and then getting Kansas City in week 17. This is something that I think is noticeable or notable. And there's a lot of uncertainty with Pitt, right? On the one hand, like Arthur Smith is coming along. They have, they've bolstered up their offensive line this offseason. We know that's been a shortcoming for them for a while. They go out, they get Roman Wilson in the draft. They bring in Russell Wilson. Is it going to be Russ? Is it going to be Justin Fields? How are you handling this team right now?
Well, for the most part, I'm just not that heavy, right? I do think they'll be okay, but we've just seen with, look, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Yep.
Did Arthur Smith give Derrick Henry all those carries because Arthur Smith is some kind of genius, or because Mike Vrabel made him?
Yeah, you right? Do it. I'll rub your nose in it.
But when he was, so I think I don't hate Najee. I liked him in early best ball, and then they announced Arthur Smith. I think both he and Jaylen Warren are viable. I'm not crazy about stack huffing them on the same roster very often.
Did you see me on Twitter? I tagged you on one of those questions.
Did you? And yeah. Even though their price is right, I don't trust that. If the whole value of stack huffing is if one of them goes down, the other one can crush, right?
Okay.
You want that upside. You want that historic upside. And I don't trust Arthur Smith to take Snell or whoever the third running back is there and give him 100 carries if one of the first two guys goes down. So I don't like doubling up unless I know there's two. Like, that's why I like Pollard and Spears, because I'm pretty comfortable that if one of those guys goes down, the other guy's going to see a significant uptick in usage.
My question to you on Twitter was Dallas. Was Rico, Dowdle, and Zeke.
Oh, I did see that. And if you had asked me 2 days before, I would have said yes. Even though I just am not, I can't draft Zeke Elliott as bad as he's been ahead of Rico Dowdle. In fact, while we were drafting, I'm doing my first new dynasty for a year in 4 years. And I just took Rico Dowdle in the 13th round because my attitude is, this is FFPC. I've got Laporta, Kyle Pitts, I've got Neighbors. I got 3 or 4. I got Terry McLaurin. I got 4 great wide receivers, 2 very good quarterbacks. I'll piece together running back. But long story short, what about Deuce Vaughn? We know that he's the son of a coach.
Yeah, I just don't. Of a coach.
On Dallas. Dallas.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw someone talking about Deuce Vaughn, and it just put me off the stack because I don't. Well, first of all, I don't know that even if Rico Dowdle goes down, Zeke has it in him to crush anymore, and I'm not sure Rico Dowdle has it in him to crush. I think
Yeah.
the process of and the price is right to do it. So I'm not against doing it if it makes sense in certain teams, but it's not one I'm going to push.
I'll buy that. I did the opportunity arose one time in my first. I'm through like 75, 80 drafts, something like that, across all the platforms. And I was sitting there. I think it was an eliminator on Underdog, and I was like, I have one running back, and it's the 12th round. And then I was at the turn, and both Zeke and Rico were there, and I was like, you know what? Like, could this be a thing? So I reached out to you after I did that. But yeah, I don't know. I love Tennessee for that. I'm on board with Pittsburgh for that. The jury's still out in Dallas, but I think it can be done profitably if it's built into like a mega zero RB team where like your first running back off the board is somewhere in the Jonathan Brooks, Zach Moss range, 8th, 9th round turn, somewhere around there. Are there any other
Let
teams
me
where
look.
you're
I'm
interested
looking
in
for
that?
a couple of stack huffs that I might like this year.
Yeah. Would you ever do it with a team like Detroit where both their running backs are kind of pricey?
I think New England is viable with Ramondre and Gibson. Both are super cheap. I don't know that there's a third guy there.
Maybe New Orleans?
I think Singletary and Tyrone Tracy is interesting, although that Eric Gray is still there, so I wouldn't go crazy.
I would consider it with Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, maybe.
See, I think Josh Jacobs is going way too early. I'm going to have a lot of Marshawn Lloyd, but I don't feel the need to have both. Because again, think of it this way. When you take a 3rd round pick and a 12th round pick, what's the upside, right? You know,
a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I mean, if Lloyd goes down, they'll put A.J. Dillon in as the backup, you know?
I think Dillon might be on his way out, to be honest.
He might be. But the point I really feel very strongly, the perfect example was the year that I wrote my first Stack Cuff article, who was that Chiefs running back that got hurt? And then Kareem Hunt just went nuclear week 1. And Kareem Hunt got it, but one was going in the 7th round. One was, okay. Another perfect Stack Cuff was the year that Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, before either one had broken out.
Oh, in Atlanta.
And that one was going in the 7th round, one was going in the 10th round, and they both went nuclear. You know, I'm looking. I want it to be mostly 7th to 12th. I want it to be 7th to 10th round guys. Mm-hmm. Who are being held, their ADP has fallen because they're both there, right? So you're getting a value on both of them, and they can pay off that value without an injury. But if you get that injury, the other guy can crush. And would you trade a 7th and a 10th round pick for a 3rd round pick?
Yes.
And that's the key thing I look for in these situations.
The problem for me with that, from a theoretical perspective right now, is this is something to me that we're doing later on in the draft window, because there are still situations available, strictly speaking, to running backs where you don't have to trade in a 7th and an 11th for a 3rd round pick, because there's the opportunity for a 9th or a 10th or an 11th round pick to become a 3rd round pick later on in the draft season.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah. For all the talk about this, it's not something I do very often.
Yeah.
But I do think it's an intriguing thing to do occasionally. And my favorite one this year is Pollard and Spears.
Yeah. Would you consider Washington with Eckler and Brian Robinson? They're both late 10th, 11th round.
I would. I've been down. You know, it's funny. I've been going back and forth on Eckler. I really do think he looked terrible last year, but he had a high ankle sprain.
Yeah.
But he had a high ankle sprain. You know, I mean, he is someone I am. You know, I like Brian Robinson a lot last year. I just think with Drake May there, they're not going to drop the ball off nearly as much as they had. Drake May runs with the ball, and these big arm quarterbacks are rarely drop off to the running back guys.
Yeah.
And that's what, so I think Brian Robinson and Eckler are both okay, but I'm still like, if I get some, if I can get an inkling that Eckler might be the old Eckler, I mean, he is a steal where he is.
That's a very interesting discussion. And that was the mindset that I had last year with Anthony Richardson and the running back situation in Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor. And then we see this athletic freak quarterback in Anthony Richardson, built like a Greek god. He comes and he gets hurt and he plays all of like 7 combined quarters or 9 combined quarters, whatever it was. Yep. And then it's like backup quarterback season for Jonathan Taylor, and he sees a ton of catches. So my thinking shifted a little bit through that because I was way overweight Anthony Richardson. I was down on Jonathan Taylor last season. And now it's like, if there's a pass catching running back playing on a team with a mobile quarterback, particularly talking about Jaden Daniels, how he is not built like Anthony Richardson was, and we can't just like say injuries are linear and we can compare them because we can't. But it's just something.
He also is the most upright runner I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. So there's definite potential for Jaden Daniels to get injured this year, and I think that would benefit someone like Austin Eckler being the pass catching back or the assumed pass catching back. So yeah, my jury's still out for me too. I have taken Austin Eckler as like an RB2 because I think if he is hitting, he's hitting rather hard, and trying to piece together like how we make these rosters, these puzzles, into the most plus EV thing that we can. I think we have to be thinking about like contingent value and how that would benefit a roster most. A guy like Austin Eckler hitting, it's probably he's turning heads, and it's probably he's going to be the RB3, the RB4 on most of the rosters that you're seeing him drafted. So for me, if I'm taking the shot on a guy like that, he's going to be on like a 0 running back team. He's going to be like my second running back on the roster. And then I'm piecing together the rest through late stack cuff, stuff like that. Any reaction to that? Any thoughts on that?
No, I think that is absolutely reasonable. That's why I'm struggling so much with Eckler. Every time I want to get, every time
you're on the clock, dude.
What's that?
I said you're on the clock, dude.
Yeah. Every time I want to get behind it, I find some reason not to.
Yeah. I think that's natural.
Let me ask you one.
Okay.
Jonathan Brooks at ADP.
He's my dude. You know me.
That's who I'm taking in this draft. I have Anthony Richardson, Pacheco, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Nico Collins, and David Njoku. I'm taking Brooks as my second running back.
You know me. I'm always trying to figure out the puzzle, right? Like my analytical brain is always trying to figure out the puzzle. And I think a lot of people
sometimes
in this
to distraction.
Yes. Oh, what? A lot of people in a lot of the field in this early draft window are not optimizing for variance enough. And that includes like injuries, that includes depth chart battles, that includes the schedule up until Wednesday of this week. That includes so much in this early draft window that I felt like the field just was not optimizing for that variance correctly. So in this early draft window, I built almost exclusively 0 running back teams, like mega 0 running back teams, where Jonathan Brooks was like the first running back on the roster in the 8th, 9th round. Zach Moss's, we talked about Austin Eckler. You mentioned Devin Singletary. All these guys are guys that could, through one act of variance or another, see their ADP jump up into the 5th round, for example. Like, what if Jonathan Brooks is the guy in camp? He shows no ill wear from his ACL injury. He is getting all the starter snaps. He's going to be in the 5th round. Like, it's going to happen. Same thing with like Zach Moss. Like, what if one of the 5th, 6th, 7th rounders that are playing behind him does not come out of camp and look great? Like, what if Chase Brown is purely a scat back type player? What if Zach Moss has the
Or
Joe
vice
Mixon?
versa. What if Chase Brown is more than that?
Yeah,
and Zach
100%.
Moss is the complementary piece. And it goes back to, sorry to interrupt, but it goes back to something I remember doing on a pod with JM that he loved. I compared each team to a mixed drink. And, a mixed drink, if you have too much alcohol, the drink is terrible. If you don't have enough alcohol, it doesn't get you where you need to go. You need to build a certain amount of, you need a floor and a ceiling on these teams, right? And, again, how much is salt and pepper? But you don't want a team that's all upside, and you don't want a team that's all floor. So I had Pacheco, and now I have Brooks. So my third running back will probably be a little safer to balance off Brooks's volatility. So that's how I look at it. But I will say I do put more alcohol in the mixed drink than I did a couple years ago.
You sly dog, you. Yes, we've done it, guys. We did it. I think we're going to end there, man, because that is the perfect ending.
I think we need to do one last thing.
All right, what's that?
I think each of us needs to give a cheap team, a team that you can get cheaply, that has a good week 16, week 17 schedule. And I can go first if you want to think about yours.
Okay, shoot.
The New York Giants go to Atlanta, and then they go to Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
I think those, and you can add now you can't add really cheap Atlanta pieces, but you could add Kirk Cousins, right?
Yeah.
If you have a Kirk Cousins, Kyle Pitts, Devin Singletary or Tyrone Tracy's stack, I think that's even Daniel Jones, it's really cheap. And Indy, same thing. You can get really, you don't have to spend a ton, and the Giant pieces for the most part are free. And those are really good game environments. And I don't think they're great defenses either.
I will buy that. In the spirit of what we're trying to capture here, talking about cheap pieces, I kind of gave mine already in Tennessee, but I'm going to flip it a little bit. My love for Tennessee is out there. We get it. But in kind of bending your rules a little bit, I'll say Kansas City, and this is why. Last year, we had Travis Kelce in the first, second round. Now he's down in the fourth round. Patrick Mahomes is not quarterback one per ADP this season. He had been for the previous 2 years. There's all kinds of uncertainty with Rashee Rice. They bring in Xavier Worthy. They bring in Hollywood Brown. But Xavier Worthy is being drafted over Hollywood Brown right now. And Isaiah Pacheco is a fifth rounder that should be, in my opinion, a third rounder. So the value on Kansas City, and we talk about like touchdowns mattering
and
for
Houston,
our fantasy games.
And Houston, like Houston, Houston has a great, at Kansas City, at Baltimore. You think Baltimore is not a good matchup, but that game could, there's enough weapons there for that game to go off. And we've seen CJ Stroud, and we've seen that team then pull back when they're even or slightly ahead, but that's a game they could be behind and really pushing.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Houston pass catchers and CJ Stroud. My favorite target on Houston right now is Joe Mixon per ADP.
Agree.
All right. So yeah, a little bit bending the rules in your exercise, but that's my answer. My two answers.
I thought it was a very innovative way. And the truth is, I think Hollywood Brown is a really, really good pick right now. The fact that people are drafting Worthy close to him, Worthy has a lot. He might not be ready year one.
No.
And if Rashee Rice, he'll play, but he might only get like 3 touches a week.
Mm-hmm.
And if Rashee Rice it doesn't have a long suspension, Worthy's the fourth option.
Yep.
So Hollywood Brown, on the other hand, is a guy that is really good, and if he stays healthy, could really crush ADP.
100%. Love that. I'm buying the Kansas City skill position players. I'm buying Patrick Mahomes, who is my QB1 this season. Remember, touchdowns are what matters. The magic number, and we have a robust 10, 15-year sample. The magic number to reach overall quarterback one status is 40 touchdowns. It doesn't matter if they're coming through the air. It doesn't matter if they're coming on the ground. That is the magic number. So I had this Twitter rant, and I had a discussion with a couple of other folks about, I made a bold call that Dak Prescott has a better chance to be the overall quarterback one than Lamar Jackson. You look at Lamar Jackson's touchdowns.
I'm not that high on Lamar.
I am not.
We've seen these running quarterbacks as their career goes on run less, and you want to know the worst Week 17 game? The other thing keep in mind, folks, is with correlations, is you want to correlate a good game, right? I mean, I don't mean that you can't draft, a New England Patriot in the 15th round and a Charger in the 18th round. That's fine. But if you're thinking, if you're galaxy braining, taking the first Charger off the board with the first Patriot off the board, because they play in Week 17, that game is objectively a game that might only score 25 points.
Yeah.
You keep that in mind too. We're trying to correlate games that are actually going to score points.
Yes, sir. I love it. And don't not draft the Miami Dolphins because they play outdoors in Week 17. Please do not do that. Draft them. They're playing Cleveland. This is the same thing I was arguing all last offseason. Not arguing, but arguing with the wall maybe, about drafting Jets Cleveland correlations last year, because they were the Thursday night football game in Week 17. It's like, oh, you can't do that. There's zero chance that could shoot out. Well, the problem was the hit rate is still higher than what the field was utilizing because people weren't doing it. Anyway, we digress. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today, man. That was great. We got a lot of good stuff.
I'm sorry. We just had so much to cover. I just couldn't contain myself.
No, that was great, man. I love jamming it up with you. We talked a lot about your confidence rankings. Again, find those over at Sharp Football Analysis. Just search confidence rankings. Is that what they're titled on the site? If they want to pull that up on the search tab.
Say that again.
They're just called confidence rankings on the site, so they can just search confidence rankings over there.
And the easiest way to find them each week is to follow me on Twitter, follow Sharp Football Analysis on Twitter, and they're going to tweet out each one of those.
Beautiful. Follow Todd at Best Ball NFL. I'm Hilow. You know where to find me. We'll be bringing these industry experts through the 1 week season Best Ball Plus product to you every week on Friday at 9 a.m. between 9 a.m. and 12 noon Eastern. Depends on if we pre-record. If you're not a Best Ball Plus member, head on over to oneweekseason.com. Get signed up for the Best Ball Plus package. We are bringing 95 training sessions to your inbox, including all the rankings, all the there's a course that I wrote on how to attack best ball that is included as well. You're going to get storyboard drafts. You're going to get all kinds of good stuff. But 95 30-minute to 60-minute training sessions that are akin to one-on-one trainings to make you a better best ball player. Head on over to oneweekseason.com. Get signed up for the Best Ball Plus package, and don't miss any of those. As always, Todd, it was awesome chatting with you. I thank you for coming on. And until next time, y'all, we'll see you.
1 week season.